a Neanderthal site with an overwhelming number of adult caribou bones. Salzgitter Lebenstein, a 50,000-year-old open-air Middle Paleolithic site in northern Germany, is a typical Neanderthal site. Stone tools, evidence of hearths, and butchered animal remains, and so on. But what makes this particular site so special? Well, the Neanderthals here, when hunting, appear to have only targeted adult caribou. However, about 16 mammoth were also found at the site. With roughly 100 caribou being found, it seems this group of Neanderthals specialized in the hunting of caribou, specifically adult caribou. So, why was this? Many of the animals were taken in the autumn, a time when the caribou begin to migrate. Naturally, this leads me to believe this would have been prime opportunity to get the largest animals you can then process. More on that in a moment. To last through the long and brutal European winters. This is also a time when caribou begin to rut. Caribou calving, at least in North America, does not begin until late May and early June. This leads me to believe that the adults would outnumber the young by a milestone. It is likely the Neanderthals at the time did not believe the young caribou to be worth the effort when large males and females were available. Again, remember that this migration is possibly at the start of the long European Ice Age winters. So while calves or young caribou were more tender, larger, more mature animals will provide more food, which will last longer. Many bone tools have been found at the site, including wedges, possibly used to split further bones, possible knives from mammoth ribs, wedge knives, or in German, Kellmesser, which is a type of classic Middle Paleolithic tool associated with the Mycokean, or the Mycocagian. I couldn't really figure out how to pronounce this word. But in the simplest terms, they are asymmetrical bifaces with one edge being worked while the other is blunted. Wedge knives are smaller than hand axes. There are also many different forms. However, it is something I might go into in another video. Finally, one of the highlighted bone tools is a possible bone spearhead, something that is almost unheard of in the Middle Paleolithic. This finding at the time, 1950s, was highly fought against, but with new discoveries in time, it seems the new thinking is on the side of this. This artifact is 1 in a million, and unfortunately, not too much information has been published on this specific artifact, so this is where the conversation on it stops. Unfortunately, that is all the information I have gathered today, but I can bring up some interesting facts that I learned while researching this. One thing I found out is that it is the northernmost point, at least in Europe, where Neanderthal bones have been found. Almost all the bone tools were made from mammoth bones, despite the overwhelming amount of caribou bones available. Another thing to note is that after the animals were butchered, all of the long bones were pretty much cracked open to expose the rich marrow, whereas younger animals, their bones were not cracked open to expose the marrow, and also stuff like phalanges and all that were not cracked open. A lot of the bones were actually discarded, which is very strange for Middle Paleolithic sites. I'm now going to give some of my thoughts and opinions on the site. I'm mostly going to give some speculative views regarding food preparation and a few other things. Firstly, I want to clarify, I'm not an expert. I have no formal training, and I'm just a guy on the internet with an interest in Neanderthals. So if I say something that is incorrect or doesn't make any sense, please feel free to correct me. First off, I would think that the Neanderthals at this open air site most likely air dried most of the meat. To turn meat into jerky uses a lot of resources. Surprisingly, or not surprisingly, I should say, starting a fire is relatively easy, but keeping the fire long enough to process 80 plus caribou to turn them all into jerky, which would take hours, is just not going to happen, especially if there's not a lot of wood available. So most likely, I would think that they were processing their meats like the Inuit would, which is basically just cutting the meat really thin and then hanging it to air dry in the cold. Another interesting thing I found out is that none of the bones have char marks on them from fireplaces, which leads me to suggest that none of the meat was being cooked, because in Middle Paleolithic sites, usually there's charred bones found, which mostly is associated with them cooking the meat right on the bone, which is what a lot of hunter-gatherer cultures today do. Almost all of the caribou were harvested at the same day, so this is probably a hunting party or a tribe, a group of Neanderthals that stumbled upon the migrating herd and decided to kill 82 plus caribou. It's also not known if the 16 or so mammoth at the site were scavenged or hunted. That's just something that we do not know. And now we're going to sort of talk about stone tools. Thousands and thousands of stone flakes from the flint knapping process have been uncovered. And this leads me to believe that there was once a high percentage of workable flint knapping stones available in the general area. So this would mean they didn't have to travel very far to find stone tools or stone, sorry, to make their stone tools. I'm gonna have a lot of links in the description. Check out some of the stone tools. It's mostly cores, but again, there's also wedge knives, which are very cool to look at. And a lot of the material looks very, very high quality, which is something I can appreciate. And that's pretty much going to wrap up today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I know towards the end, everything kind of comes crumbling down, but a lot of this stuff is behind paywalls or is just not publicly available. Like the Neuenmark Nord site, a lot of this information is very old. 1950s Germany had a lot of things to worry about. I'm not sure if you guys noticed. So a lot of information is unfortunately either not translated to English or is still locked up in a vault somewhere. But check me out on Discord, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, wherever else, doesn't really matter. Let me know what you thought down below and feel free to add anything or correct me if I was wrong. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Now I will go into more details on this. Almost all of the long bones have been smashed open in a uniform manner that's supposed to be,